Welcome to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass with Brett Henderson, founder of Strategic Wealth Endeavor. We've created a community of veteran entrepreneurs just like you who are ready to help you succeed. Our podcast provides expert advice and resources so you can overcome any obstacle in your way. With the help of Brett and veteran guest experts, you can build a battle-ready business mindset to take your company to the next level. Thank you for listening to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to part 2 of Brett Henderson's discussion with Dr. Denise Kruszewski. Now, Dr. K is a clinical psychologist who's worked extensively with the military. This time around, the focus is on ways to protect against burnout and build resiliency when things get tough. So, Brett, tell us some more.
Well, it's hard to say build resiliency. You can't say that 10 times fast, can you, Patrice? That's
I'll say it once, right? And that's good. Now let's
better than I can do it. Good thing I'm not the MC. We'd never get this thing done, but that's good. Well, good morning, ladies. How are we doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah, bit busy morning thus far. Seems like everyone's had. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Hit the ground running.
Good. Well, definitely great to have you back. We're excited. I think our last podcast was epic and amazing. We have some great feedback on it. And so this is, I think, a natural progression of where we left off. So last time was more individual, and I think we have you're going to share a couple stories or a story. Sorry, I'm not going to ask you to have too many stories, but of example or two of failure, and then how that what you learned from those failures can really drive you as you strive to exceed. Because failing is one thing, quitting is another, right? A failure just leads you. I think the more you fail, the closer you get to victory. But quitting's quitting. And there's a huge difference. And some people just quit, I think, but failing, as long as you learn from it and apply those lessons, just makes you better. You know, I had a flow moment this weekend before I turned over. I don't know if you saw my post yet on LinkedIn or not. I have my flow when I work out. I start thinking all my thoughts for business, whatnot. And this morning or yesterday morning, I said, let's stop and actually take a minute and record it and get it down. And a little cheesy because my shirt was off, but it was hot and I worked out. And I literally just did it after I worked out, still breathing hard, and just talked about Marines and or most veterans aren't used to failure, right? Your unit does well. You don't generally lose. Well, we kind of lost it. Well, if we won't talk about where we were a year ago and where we just left, but that's a whole other thing. The Marines themselves didn't fail. The leadership failed the Marines, I think, in that example, and the military over in Afghanistan. That's a whole nother thing that we will not open up today. However, individually, your unit does well, you learn, and you're in training or rehearsals or before you go on deployment, you train, and you do fail, but you learn and you improve and you go again and you go again, you get better and better and better. So in business, lots of us come out, you have one set of skills, then you think you're going to run a company or do something or take on a new role. And your identity still as individuals a 10, but your skill set and your experience in that role is a 0 or 1 because you don't have any. Mm-hmm. And so the faster you can learn, the faster that will improve, but it's okay to fail. And if you actually take a new task and mentally tell yourself, I'm probably going to fail because I don't have the experience, the skill set here, and you expect to fail, but you expect to learn from that failure, you improve that much sooner. So that was kind of my gist yesterday morning, the flow. If you haven't checked out my LinkedIn post, check that out. And I actually asked Patrice and Chris if they can actually turn into a mini podcast. That would be a nice way to get out too. So anyway, that's what my thoughts are on failure. So I think the more we fail, the better. Mm-hmm. And if you want to chat about that and kind of, I'll let you take it over from here, Dr. K. So welcome back.
Wow. I this may sound fake, but it is totally not. You couldn't have cued me better than you just did. Like, really? You don't even know, you honestly don't even know. So what you just said is, interestingly enough, where I'm going to start today. And
Perfect.
It's about my personal story, but that is just so perfect. So thank you for that. Yeah. And so where I'm going to start with, basically an experience I had in kind of getting what you just said.
Sure.
So basically, you may remember that I was hired at Marine Special Operations Command at Pendleton. I started April 1st, 2012. And when I was asked to come on board by the active duty psychologist who was there at the battalion, he was going to be going to deploy and go on training, and they wanted someone there for consistency. So that's kind of why they brought me on. And he was amazing. He was huge in helping me to kind of get acclimated. And one of the first things he said, I'll never forget my first week there. I was coming from the VA where you had to log like 8 out of 8 clinical hours and be in your office and like just do, all that. And he said to me, if you're in your office for 8 out of 8 hours today, you will not be doing your job. He said, what here at the battalion, we want to see you out and about. We want to see you at the gym. We want to see you, upstairs. We'll see you on walks outside. And that's where you're going to actually really gain momentum and do your job. And I was like, okay, I was just taking everything in. I was like, this is great. I'm with you. I'll do it. And what, it was very exciting to me in the beginning. And I got to know a bunch of people. I was talking with people. And what I started to realize, because he had also said to me, just know, he's like, every conversation you have, especially right now, is kind of like a sniff test. And people are going to be really having 2 conversations with you at once. Everyone you talk with is going to be trying to figure out who you are as a person and professionally, whether they want to speak with you more, use your services. So I started, had that mentality, and I would have conversations, and all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, after the fact, I realized I think they were actually, telling me some stuff. And they would come back and they would say, yeah, like, can we sit down again? And I was like, oh, I didn't think we sat down in the first place, but sure. And so it was great. I mean, my first couple of years there, I was just had the exact opposite experience in the sense of I was loving it. I was just hitting the ground running. I was just taking it all in. And really feeling very successful at first. Like, this is awesome. Same first 2 years, I got married and I had both my kids 1.5 years apart.
Jeez.
And so it was kind of a busy time. And I was loving it. I had purpose at home, purpose at work. Like, it was just awesome. Then after the first 2 years, as you and I have also talked, I have one of my kids has special needs, and it was starting to become more clear. And also, as you may know, definitely know, there's changes in command, changes in personnel,
Yep.
Changes
everything.
Changes everything, how we're going to do this, what we're going to need now, which again is part of what was exciting, right? Like, it kept it fresh. But what I started to notice was, okay, I got to kind of keep up with this. I got to make new relationships, kind of new sniff tests, new everything. So that was fine. But, it was definitely starting to be kind of a grind those next couple of years, just going hard at home, doctor's appointments, specialists, trying to get whatever I needed there. And then at work. And then about 4.5 years in, more changes in personnel. And this feeling that I was having of basically being irritated by a lot of stuff. People coming in with their ideas and, the way they wanted things done and kind of not getting it. And
people love change. What do you mean? People always love unsolicited advice. That's
right.
My favorite kind is unsolicited advice.
Right. And the new great ideas, right?
Yeah.
And for people who are not subject matter experts in what I was doing and, people who had no idea, which was fine, but I started to notice. And then I realized, back to that original advice he had given me, I actually had no one I could speak openly with, because every person at the battalion could be a client. Nothing was set into place of like, what if I'm having an issue? What if I need to like be open about a problem I'm having at work? And I just pushed through. I just kept pushing through. I was like, well, that must mean I don't have needs, And then you're looking around at people doing amazing work who are deploying, training, putting their life on the line, their families. And I was like, I have nothing to complain about. Like, just get over it. Just keep going. Right. And that's kind of how I would treat myself. Like, just do it. Just keep going no matter what. They're keeping going. I'm going to keep going. And at home too, right? Like, you get home, kids need something, you're there. You're just going to keep going. It's not like you can ask the kids, can you please not have this meltdown right now?
Right.
So getting to about 5.5 years in, that was when I was like, I cried 2 times in front of my senior chief. I hadn't cried in almost 6 years there. 2 pregnancies, a lot of other stuff, no crying. And that was when I realized I was done. I'm like, this is just too much. This is just not working for me. And I decided to leave the unit. And so back to kind of what you talk about quitting kind of thing. I felt really guilty. I was like, this is, people were like, we're going to miss, it just felt like it was going to be a big need and that kind of thing. But I just knew that I just wasn't feeling good anymore. Like I couldn't kind of do what I needed to do. So I felt the guilt, but I was like, I really care so much about this place. I didn't want to not do my best there. So I did make the choice to leave. And then the fog started to clear, and like a month or two went by. And I remember I told you, Brian reached out to me. And at that point, I was even a little almost ashamed to meet with him, because I felt in my mind, I was starting to realize like, whoa, I really wasn't myself that last like 6 months there or so. I was looking back, like I wasn't really like a team player. I was kind of like seeing the negative and everything that was going on. I was feeling that irritability. I was getting more judgmental, like psychologists, you think, oh, we're all here.
Mm-hmm.
But then I recognized, I was burnt out and I didn't know it. And I had lost that like purity of purpose, that passion. And then I spent some time really learning, like what you talked about, like realizing it wasn't quitting, it was failure. Exactly what you just said. That's what's, isn't that, I swear, that's so beautiful. No. Like, so I had left the job, but what had happened was a failure. I had failed myself. I had failed to recognize that I had needs, that I needed support. And then of course the system had failed me because there was nothing in place for that. But, they didn't know because I didn't let them know, right? Like Dr. K got it. Dr. K is doing it. It's fine. And once I can get in that learning mindset to really work with that sort of shame and guilt I felt, I was like, well, you know what? Never again. Like this is going to be the shift. And that's when I really did, totally true story, start diving deeper into the mindfulness and self-compassion work. And so that's, just kind of this realization I had personally and professionally that has been the springboard into everything I've done since.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I think it is very hard for all of us, especially in your leadership role, to admit that you're failing. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that you could improve and that something could be different, and to look in the mirror. It's very easy, even the Marine Corps or any branch, to point fingers. Mm-hmm. Right. It's always easy to do that. It's so hard to look in the mirror, say it's you, it's me, it's me. I'm the problem. I have the challenge. I need to fix myself. And it's so hard to do, especially with society now. I think all society now is just point fingers and blame and just try and get money from everybody else, tell everybody else they're wrong. That's a whole nother point too. We can talk about that. But to be able to say, hey, I'm failing at something. Okay, what's my role, this particular role I'm not excelling at. Why am I failing? Understand why you're failing, and then what steps you're taking to improve. Right. So let me ask you this, going back to burnout, or did you want to talk about, I'll let you drive a little bit. We could talk about burnout, but I'll let you have your agenda, and then I'll kind of just jump in here and there.
Well, I was just going to say, what do you think makes that so hard? What do you think makes it so hard to do when you're in that moment?
Because it's emotional, and it's very hard to turn the emotions off and look at yourself objectively. It's so hard to do.
Yes. And I think it's the word you brought up last talk, which is a key for today too, which is vulnerability, right? Because in that moment, my identity was tied up in being someone who didn't have needs, who could just go and drive through and do everything. And so many leaders and businessmen I work with, and women now, they get tied up in that. That's what I'm noticing. And that's where this is going, is that there's vulnerability in those moments. And I will change your phrasing just a little, if I can, for me. It's not about telling myself I failed. Like for me, when I tell myself that, it's actually really, that's where some of the closing down wants to come in, but what it is it's saying, okay, something is uncomfortable and it's not working. And I have to find that out. And I have to be willing to feel vulnerable and ask those questions of myself and of those around me. Right. And that's the thing. And when we get in that blame and pointing fingers, that is because we are hijacked. Like our brain is in that stress hijack, and it's just on like defense and offense mode. And that's how I was. That's why I know I was like this, it's easy to point the fingers because people were not really doing the best they could be doing, around me either. But the most important thing was to say, what am I needing so I can regroup and succeed here? What am I needing? And I never, ever asked that question.
I think it's just two different styles. We're saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a straight shooter, direct,
Mm-hmm.
easygoing. Well, maybe not easygoing, but I'm a straight shooter. So I'd rather just quit. Hey, I'm failing.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out. You just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it, and it's okay though. But there's the
Mm-hmm.
difference. If you beat yourself up, you're beating your identity up for a role you're failing at.
Yes.
Like if you ask me to go play polo, I never played polo before. I'm going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So my identity is still a 10. My role 0 to 10 in polo is a 0. So
Mm-hmm.
I assume I'm going to fail. I assume I'm going to be a bad polo player because I've never hit a ball on a horse before. But that's okay. So I think maybe we're saying the same thing, but the sooner you're okay not beating yourself up,
Yes.
not having the head trash to go along with it.
Yes.
But if you acknowledge failure when you fail, and use as a learning point to move forward and be better and
Mm-hmm.
and build your skill set and take that role from a 0 to a 1 and then 1 to a 2, or maybe go from 0 to 5. Maybe you're a fast learner. I'm not a very fast learner. I rode the short bus, but that's okay. So as long as you don't beat yourself up with head trash, I think we're saying the same thing. You're saying it the clinical way. I'm saying it the
Exactly. And that's good. And that's why I always work with people on finding what we call their compassionate voice, which again sounds fuzzy, but really it's like the true voice that motivates you, truly. And that is different for everybody. So I totally agree with you. And I think what you're saying exactly, the beating yourself up, that's often the default voice we have, the self-critical voice. And really discerning, like, where am I coming at myself with a self-critical voice and where am I coming at myself with a self-compassionate voice? Both want us to succeed. Both want us, to learn, but one comes about it, like you're saying, trashing ourselves. And the other one is like, no, you got this and we're going to do it. But what do we need? How do we get there? And so, yes, I agree with you. I think we're definitely saying this, the same thing.
Yeah. It's in Sandler sales training, they call it critical parent versus nurturing parent.
Mm.
That's exactly what they call it. Like no one likes the condescending critical parent. Everyone likes nurturing parent. We were talking a little bit before, like this morning, my little guy, 5, he has a bit of a chest cold and he was crying because I got him up at 5 in the morning because driving, but trying to eat pancakes and he couldn't blow his nose. And he was crying and kept crying. I'm like, come on, don't cry. But I shifted to critical parent. Like, what, are we a crybaby? Are we a big boy? Are we a baby? What are we? And so like, then I caught myself doing what my father used to do, like beat me down. I'm like, stop, catch it. Don't be critical parent. It's all right, dude, get it out. And then we had to remember how to blow our nose for 5 minutes. And that was a whole fun exercise too.
Yeah.
But it's easy. It's easier to be critical parent than nurturing parent. It's so hard to be self-aware of your own emotions and catch yourself when, I'm going emotionally in a negative state.
Yeah.
To be able to catch that is so hard, especially for some people who are just passionate, as what I call it, because you're wear your emotions on your sleeve. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so hard. It's easier for the introverts to catch it because they're always analyzing everything. But if you wear your emotions on your sleeves and you're a passionate person and you're extrovert, your emotions are kind of who you are. And it's so hard to acknowledge that.
Yeah, well, I will say that. So just to admit,
no, please, you go. This is your podcast, not mine.
No, but that example is perfect. Exactly what you said with your son this morning. And I had that moment in a different way with my son yesterday. And the thing is, what helps you to do that when you train on this is in the moment when you're sort of being the critical parent is to notice that you yourself are having a tough time. So in that moment, because I find this with my son a lot, and even with clients and whatever, he's not having the tough moment yet. Like he's doing something in a way that is working for him. It's just not working for me or the situation or what needs to happen. And if I start to notice, and that's where mindfulness training really comes in, by naming, like, you know what? And I will tell myself in my own mind, this is a tough moment. Like this right now is a tough moment. And then bringing in the self-compassion, like for, again, that nurturing parent for myself, like, okay, can I take a few breaths? What am I needing right now so I can re-engage with him in an effective way? And so that's a step a lot of us skip. And that's what some of this, conversation I was hoping would be about is There's the what and the how. There's the what, which notices we're having that tough moment. And then the how, which is how we address ourselves when we notice that, which then is that platform back into the success or the effectiveness, the resilience.
That's really good. I think for me, once I had that moment, we got through breakfast and got out the door and was driving to school. I caught myself, and I just remember my father just yelling at me and just, and I just told my son, like, hey, grandpa used to not be very nice and would yell and do things. And I caught myself being like grandpa this morning, and I apologized. I don't do that. Catch yourself. And he's 5, right? I'm apologizing to a 5-year-old, but I truly was like, hey, dude, I'm sorry for losing my temper this morning and yelling at you. So please forgive me. It's like, I'm sorry, Daddy. And so it was like, I felt bad. I started crying myself, sitting there apologizing to my 5-year-old. So that I get it. I get it. Acknowledging and catching yourself. It's not easy, but it's so important. We all have to do it. So how does that tie into burnout?
Oh, just one more thing. But just about what you just said was that, so then we call them, there are 2 arrows. The first arrow is in the moment, like when you're in the moment, like you were kind of acting in a way you didn't want to be. And then there's the second arrow when you felt guilty or ashamed about it after, when you felt bad. That's another place of vulnerability that we need to catch, because that can continue to play under the surface and really be like an emotional hangover for us. And that's what I felt after I left MARSOC. When I was talking about those few months, I was like having these like, man, that I wish I hadn't. And again, I didn't do anything wild or crazy, and it's fine. But I know myself, like I wasn't who I wanted to be inside and out. And so what you just said was very helpful in bringing up this sort of what we do at both points of contact, when we're in the moment and then after the fact. So I just thought that was a really key point you just made. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. Perfect. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. It's easy to say, hard to do.
Yes, except trainable. So that's kind of where we are. So the overall message is, again, with that vulnerability word, we want to adequately deal with vulnerability when it arises, when it reemerges, and continually. Back to your example about polo. Let's say you start up at a 0 and you're okay with that because you've never played. Then you get to a 5 or whatever, where I noticed my trap, and I've seen this with some other people. It's okay to have that learning mentality when you're a 0 getting to 5. But let's say you're a 5 or an 8, and now you're not at an 8 anymore, right? Like now you're having some either personal or professional situation come up, you're not at your best, and you have been before. That's when, again, it can be tough to say, whoa, can I be okay with this right now enough so I can deal with it? That's the thing. Can I accept this? And so that's one of the key skills I wanted to touch on today too, is what we call radical acceptance. And this is a term a lot of people have heard. Are you familiar with that term?
No.
With radical. Oh, great. Oh, good. So radical acceptance is basically allowing things to be exactly as they are without trying to change it in this moment.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it's radical because it's complete. Like in this moment, I'm going to allow things to be exactly as they are. And what's difficult about this, especially in a moment of stress or vulnerability, is our brain is saying, fire, like solve this, fix this, do something, make it better. It's telling us to be a fixer, right? And yet that's actually not helping. And what I always tell people and myself is that, sure, if you can solve the problem, solve it. If you can fix it, fix it. If the door's open and you can close it, close it. But if it's a situation where you can't immediately change something or fix it, and it's really important and you're feeling distressed, that's that moment to invite in, can I let this be this way just right now?
There's so many ways you can look at it. You can, again, not a combat veteran, but Marines or listeners who are combat vets, I'm sure having some thoughts right now, memories, and those scenarios where it's out of their control and they have to just accept it and and can't always fix it, so to speak. But all you do is train to fix
Yeah.
fix things. And then on the personal front, in a relationship, and I think everyone can attest to this, women are different than men, and women vent. You're out with your girlfriends, you vent. You don't want to fix it, you just want to vent. And men are fixers. So when you generally, and I will stereotype, if a woman vents to a man, man's like, she has a problem, let me fix it. You do this, like you complain about work, my boss is a jerk, this is okay, well, let's get you a new job. Like, I don't want a new job. Like, you're complaining about your job, why don't you listen to me? I am listening to you. And then blows up. So
Yes.
I understand. So what I've actually had to do with a partner or two is say, okay, are you just venting now? Okay, good. Then I will just listen. And then I just accept. That's that radical
awesome.
Acceptance, I guess, is like, you just tell me whatever you're going to tell me. And I'm just going to say, And because you don't want me to fix it. And if I try and fix it, then I turn into a jerk.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I don't want to be a jerk. So you can vent. And I guess that's called radical acceptance then.
That is radical acceptance. And one thing again about the how, right? So when you're radically accepting, for example, a partner who wants to vent, what are you doing in that moment, right? Because I've trained people on this. Again, what's been great is that I'm a person and I work with people. So I get a lot of training opportunities, and I work with a lot of men. And so I'm men who come in complaining about just this. and I say to them, yes. And we meet for a while. And then I ask them periodically, of course, perfectly timed and just very skillful. I'm just kidding. But I ask them and I say, we've been meeting for a little while. Are you feeling like therapy's helping? And again, most of them will usually say, oh yeah, this is really helpful. And I'll say, well, have I fixed your problem? And they'll say, no. So what do you think is helping so much about our time together? And most of them will say, yes, I appreciate the skill building. Yes, of course, we've done some things, but really, I just like being able to talk to you and feel heard and not judged. And that this is kind of that safe place for me. They might not always say it in those words, but that's that moment when, again, man, woman, whatever, really does need to just be able to be heard compassionately. So that's kind of a moment where it's not just the listening, but it's the fact that as I'm listening, I'm really caring about that person. And I'm not in that, like, not only am I not in the fix it mode, but I'm in the, I'm going to accompany you mode. Like I'm literally, it's almost like we're kind of on an escalator together and I'm just like riding next to you, and I'm not trying to make the escalator go quicker or stop or take you off of it or whatever, but I'm right next to you. And you know what? If stuff goes down on this escalator, I'm with you. And you have that feeling with me. That's that compassionate listening. That is a skill that we need to build.
I'm just trying to obviously self-reflect as you're sharing that. And it's almost, anything's possible with training, obviously, but just the male, my mindset, I can't speak for every man, but let's just say, okay, you're riding the escalator into a pool of boiling water. And it's really hard to watch you just like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Oh, you're hot. I'm hot. This is not fun. Let's just ride here together. It's so hard to say, hey, silly bear, let's get off the escalator. You're not having a fun time on the escalator. Let's get the F off the escalator. Yes. So like, I'm a fixer. Like, you're a problem, I'm going to fix. So that's just, we're wired differently. So you're trying to rewire circuitry. It's like, you're in pain, stop the pain. You're not having a situation, get out of the situation. Yeah. So that's my mindset versus like, oh, let's ride the escalator into the wall and bash my face into it. Let's just not get on the escalator. Let's get off the escalator. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's hard to do. So I don't know the answer.
I can speak to that.
Sure.
Like if you want. So and this kind of, we talked about this a little bit last time. We could talk more this time. The difference between empathy and compassion. So my metaphor was flawed, and I'll fix it. I'm on my escalator next to your escalator. Okay. And we actually all are. Is when we ride literally on someone's escalator with them, then yes, we are in survival mode if that escalator is going to boiling water. And that's empathy. Empathy is when you are on somebody else's ride. And so, of course, you're going to feel like your life depends on it and you're going to need to fix this and you won't accept it if it's something you wouldn't accept, right? But if you're on your own escalator and you're next to theirs, and that's compassion. Like, I'm with you, but I'm not in it, and I'm with you and I care. And if you want anything from me and I can offer it, I will. But ultimately, that's when we can engage radical acceptance more skillfully, when we recognize they're on their escalator, I'm on mine, and they have to ride their ride. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge. So many stories that I don't want to share because it's too personal, but you're just triggering experiences and relationships where you've had where I put myself on that escalator and I'm like, well, this is how you think to get out off it, right? I've got the experience. Do this, like you're in pain, it's going to water. Let's do this, get out of it. But unless they come to that realization and they want to formulate a path to get off the escalator, that's on them, right? And someone has to do that. So you can't do it for someone. And I think a lot of us, especially as men, are fixers, and you want to take the hill. If you're a Marine or soldier, whatever you are, your background, your veteran, you want to accomplish a mission, and someone's in pain, you want to rescue them and go take the hill, right? Or help them take the hill if that's their goal. But they have to do it on their own. And that's so actually, you just triggered, and I shouldn't say this, but one of my ex-girlfriends is still a good friend, super successful. She's like, you have knight in shining armor syndrome. You want to fix and save. And it's like, but you can't. It's like, oh, so that's my own thing, which again, I probably shouldn't say.
It's not your own thing though. But this is what I'll say. This is what I specialize in. I hear this a lot from people. I was just having this conversation with somebody last week. And what's interesting, if you really notice, we're talking as if these are about romantic relationships, which it is. But this operates in professional relationships, especially if you work with friends, with good friends that you trust. And again, I work with some entrepreneurs who have gone into business with one another and who are good friends, and they have all this behind them. And setting boundaries and really being vulnerable about what's not working for them really is quite challenging. And that's why it becomes really important to practice this, not just even for romantic relationships, but also for business and professional relationships, because this will happen there too. And
I agree.
Right. And so
I completely agree. It's one of the same, actually. So if, like for my business, my life is my business,
right?
You know, and for years, like my life is my business. So personal is professional. My clients are my friends. And it's so for me, there's no gray line. There is no line. It's all one.
Right.
And so that's a great thing about my business. Like the way I help, like if you are a client, you are part of the family.
Yeah.
And that's just so I all in. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's shift, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And we have about 5 more minutes or so.
Sure.
On the entrepreneur side. So a veteran entrepreneur is listening, they've got their business, they're rock and rolling, and they're all in. They've taken their role from 0, 1, 2, and they left, and now they're an 8 or 9, and they want to stay at that level. Right. And so my business is successful. I'm making money. It all looks good on paper. The bank account looks okay. Right. I got the nice car. I got my Tesla. I'm helping the environment, but I'm destroying it by burning coal and fossil fuels. It's a whole other thing. But hey, I'm driving Tesla. I'm a good human being, and I'm cranking. I've got my company now. Went from 2 employees to 200. I'm rock and rolling. I'm that 8, 9-ish. But something's not quite there, right? So the burnout piece. Talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I can talk about that. I'll start, and then you can ask me more of what you're interested in. But the burnout, again, is this really important thing to be aware of, because I think about it as it's kind of like, how do you boil a frog? Is that the thing? Like slowly, it's kind of like that thing where, especially if the boiling water is something you're passionate about, you're not going to be paying attention to how that's feeling. And so again, that mindfulness piece along the way, as you get to that 8 or 9, please know that there's an energy management that needs to be happening along the way.
So with that, to that point, when you were in your role back helping MARSOC as a civilian, though, what are the signs? What are the signals where someone, if they are getting burnt out, number one, let's talk about the signs or the triggers where you can be self-aware, which is so hard to be self-aware, and to recognize those emotions or when you are starting to get burnt out. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll say, what do you do to possibly overcome it? And then we'll go from
there. Well, some of the signs are, I mean, they could vary for people, but exhaustion, like true, like in your bones, like physical exhaustion and depletion. And people tend to notice this. A lot of people I've worked with who are intense in business are also working out and very physically active. And they'll notice performance kind of reduction in their training and their working out, and not being able to kind of push themselves as hard as they were physically before. We'll notice, and that'll often tie in with burnout, ironically, difficulty sleeping. So you're not recharging with sleep, and you're still burning really hard during the day. So sleep sometimes can be a part of burnout because the body and the brain can't rest. Another thing is numbness, emotional numbness, where you're just not feeling it anymore. And again, for people whose identity is being passionate, I love that word. That is me too. Passion is the fuel. And so when you are dry on that fuel, gosh, like that's numbness. And that's ironically feels really horrible to feel numb. So that's a big sign. Of course, there could be irritability, like I was describing, and sometimes impulsivity, kind of doing things that you wouldn't have thought you would do before. Again, with many people I work with, it's not going to show itself very obviously. Most people are still very planful and, responsible, but they may decide to just, stop doing something or start doing something or make this investment or whatever, in ways that they normally wouldn't go about it. So those are some of the signs that you might see for burnout. And like I said, rigidity, because you're just trying to hold on to, you're trying to make things simpler so you can get through your day. And then everything that happens, because we know like the plan dissolves around contact, right? Like so everything that happens, you have to be ready for that. And to be fluid with it, to be flexible becomes less available because you're literally on energy reserves. And so you don't have that to burn. So those are some signs and symptoms.
So if you're feeling that, and it could be you maybe want to go out or do a hobby, like, I'm not going to do that and whatnot. So if you catch that and you feel that, and maybe you get a new client, or if you're in business, in my industry, get a client, generally a great feeling because you're building something, but you're just like, you're not excited about it. So maybe you recognize the symptoms or signs of possible burnout. So then what?
So one of the things that people don't often like to hear, and that may not even be fully feasible, especially for an entrepreneur who owns their own business, is taking a knee. We need to rejuvenate. We need to sort of unplug to revitalize ourselves. But again, I understand because again, I own my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't get 2-week vacations. Like I understand that if I don't work, I don't earn money, and that many entrepreneurs are in the same boat, and especially in the beginning of their journey. But if it's possible, I have many at this point examples of people I've helped who took a knee, whether it was taking leave or taking a couple of days off or whatever. And when I say leave, I even mean working for big organizations that offer like medical leave or something like that, and then come back and are really able to revitalize and regroup. So that's, if it's possible, truly can be helpful. But again, you have to be intentional with what you do on that leave. If you take leave and beat yourself up the whole time, or take leave but don't take leave,
right.
Or take leave and now you're dealing with intense personal stuff that's not relaxing, which is often the case, unfortunately, with, again, fires tend to burn in all rooms in the house. So this is the thing, if you can do that, but that's one thing. The next thing is bring 1 or 2 people in if you can, kind of have more outlets. If you can really be open and vulnerable, again, whether it's a trusted friend or a professional, again, that outlet is really important to really be honest and authentic about what's going on. We want to also, because there's some other things that coincide with burnout, which are depression, which are anxiety, which are clinical symptoms that you can treat with therapy. So that's another thing someone can do that can also help with burnout. And also a good therapist can help you address sleep so that you can get sleep back online to address burnout. The other reason it's helpful to speak with somebody is they can be your second brain. That's what when I'm working with like organizations or leaders there, and I see there's burnout going on, I tell them, I'm the second brain in the room with you right now. This is your business. This is your situation, but I'm looking with my brain and I'm going to see where's the leakage, where's the energy leakage for your energy, where are places we can help you gain some energy, who can help hold some of this with you if possible. And so getting that, that consultation on that can really be helpful. And then, of course, I guess I'll just put this out there too. I think that especially for entrepreneurs, times of exhaustion and burnout are almost part of it. Like there's just, because it's so 24/7. So we should plan for it. Just like we have a 401k, or we have different things for retirement. We have, we save money in case we need literal money. We need to plan and act as if burnout will happen so we can get ahead of it, right? So it's much easier to deal with it a little at a time. Take that full day off if you can, along the way, or make sure you have a few strategies that, again, someone can teach you. You can learn meditation strategies, self-kindness. Like I said, what really contributes to energy depletion is beating the heck out of yourself all day. So if that constant critical voice is there, that's draining you too. So we can train ourselves, rewire ourselves to use more of that self-compassionate voice and therefore have less depletion along the way. So there's little things we can do every single day. There's some bigger things we can do. And also just acknowledging it's part of, hey, you spend money, you don't have it, right? You spend energy, you don't have it. So that's kind of the equation of success.
Right. No, that's good. I'm just sitting here reflecting on myself, my own business, obviously, as we're chatting and listening to you, and just leads to 15 other more thoughts and questions. But this has been 40 minutes. So to keep our listeners engaged, I think we call this. I think this is a great place to stop. What's the one thing then, if let's say you've got an entrepreneur and they've got some wins and they're growing, they're doing well. And so there's a positive energy there, but it's also at the same time, at the end of the day, you're done, right? So you've had a great day, but you're just spent because you're you're getting wins, but it's a good thing, but you're just spent. And so want to talk to that too on a positive note. Maybe your business is growing well and you're all the good is happening because you are doing, because your role is going up and your identity and role for both are high numbers. And you're just tired or just maybe beat from doing it because maybe you're a man, maybe your testosterone's going down. You're in your 40s or 50s now. Maybe you want to just chat with that and we'll end on that note or just kind of wrap up there. Yeah.
Build recovery into your plan. Period. Just build recovery in. This isn't an if, it's a when. The wins are as draining as the losses. And so we have to be managing our energy along the way, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and socially. We have to be. It's the only way to keep winning.
That's true. So I definitely appreciate that. I think I'm in the phase just growing the business. We're having some wins. It's exciting. Like this podcast is new and exciting. And because the podcast, we're getting a lot more traction. I'm having more conversations, all good conversations that I'm spent. Then you finish. Then I've got my son. Then you're running around with a 5-year-old. And then it's just like, whoa. So yeah, it's a lot. But you're right. You just got to take some time off and relax and just kind of take a step back and look at where you are, where you could be, appreciate it, and give yourself a pat on the back for everything you've done, and then hit it again hard tomorrow. I think that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Patrice, you're amazing. Let's have you give us a pat on the back, or
I definitely a pat on the back. Contact
a pat somewhere, or a whack somewhere
upside the head. Now,
now I'll listen to you.
Contact information. Okay, best way to reach me is one of two ways: either my website, which is www.stressandresilience.org, or you can email me at drk, like Dr. K, at stressandresilience.org. All one word. Best way to reach me.
And for now, just hit the website. Everything's on the website, SWE90.com. That's short for Strategic Wealth Endeavor 90.com. So check us out there. Podcast. If you're listening to this, you already found the podcast library, so I don't need to say that, but everything's there.
And also, first of all, follow the podcast too to know when the next episode is ready for you. But also, if you find the information helpful, by all means share with friends and colleagues. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass podcast. Don't forget to click the follow button to become notified when new episodes become available. Securities offered through IFP Securities LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Investors LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Strategic Wealth Endeavor INC are not affiliated. The views expressed are that of the host and are for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to buy or sell securities. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. Neither IFP Investors LLC, IFP Securities LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, nor their affiliates offer tax or legal advice. Interested parties are strongly encouraged to seek advice from qualified tax and or legal experts regarding the best options for your particular circumstances. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners.